here today with Rich. Rich is going to tell us a little bit about what he does for here at Paradise and go over some of the materials that we use on the job site. Rich?
Hello, how you doing? I'm Rich. I take care of the production here at Paradise, and today we're going to be using a flat deck system. We use a Fiberglass system. It's a 3-layer system. We have a first layer here. It's a modified bitumen mat. It gets nailed down to a roof deck. The reason we nail down to a roof deck is so we don't destroy the structure of the home. So this one goes down first. It's a modified bitumen with a fiberglass mat. After that product right here, we go over it with the one that looks just like it, except it's self-adhering. This gets no fasteners in it, so it's the first layer of protection for the system that has no penetrations in it. So we have no nail holes, less ability to have any kind of leaking. This is the third layer of the system, which is typically what you're used to seeing on a flat roof. It's a modified bitumen as well, mineral surface coated. And this is the top layer that goes self-adhering over the second layer. And this gets us out to a 10-year warranty. And in the case of this job, we're going to be using, between the first and second, we're going to be using a Isoboard to give a taper, and we'll show you that in a little bit. All of our stacks over here, we use all lead stacks. We don't use any plastic or rubber, so the lead will last as long as the roof will. People that use the rubber, unfortunately that product will degrade over time. So again, we're using the highest end product we have. This is actually a PG 500. It's a roof cement. It's unlike the roof cement you can get anywhere else. This is actually specifically designed to use with these products. And the reason it's designed to work with these products is it has a much longer life than a lot of other sealants that could be used with it. At our seams, we use membrane right here. And the membrane gives this cement strength so it doesn't flex and crack. So the roof is entirely re-nailed with a Ringshank nail, which is virtually impossible to pull back out. And it's nailed to exceed code in the high velocity hurricane zone.
Now we're going to be talking about what we're going to be doing on this flat roof here, Rich.
Okay, on the flat roof, typical Florida design is a flat roof. There is no positive slope. It's against code to have a situation where, right where Anthony's standing, you can see what happens when water sits on a roof. It alligators, it degrades the product, and it shortens substantially the life of the roof. So in that system, what we just talked about, we're going to use what's an ISO tapered system. So we're going to be starting from the edge of the roof out here in this way. So we're going to create a slope, 2-slope instead of a single slope. So the water will go off in 2 directions. We're going to start at 1/2 inch. And the further we get away from the system, we gain height. And we go from 1/2 inch to the final edge of 2.5 inches. And we're able to accomplish that. What you're seeing right here is 16 feet. This way is 13 feet, so it's going to stop right about there when we hit. But we're going to have 2 inches of positive slope to keep the water off of this roof, so it can't be doing what it's been doing and degrade the roof.
So now, talking about Florida codes, on a flat roof, it has to become pitched, is that correct?
The water cannot sit on the roof, so this ponding is against code. It is illegal to have a roof that does that.
So what we do with these ISO boards is we create a pitch.
Correct.
So it's creating a pitch so this water doesn't pond for more than 48 hours per code.
Correct. Well, with our system, we don't have any ponding water. We have positive pitch, which is what we want to maintain. We're not worried about meeting Florida code. We're worried about exceeding it and doing a Paradise roof.
All right, Rich, what are we seeing here?
All right, like we discussed with the watershed system and the ability for this to lock the water in and not let the water run out like it properly should, is we're opening up here and you can see the moisture underneath of the roof because the roof is improperly installed and isn't running down the way it should. Once this water is blocked from getting out, the roof is going to fail. So actually when we do the roof, what we're going to do is we come up a little bit further up the roof. That way the shingles aren't into an area where it's not having the positive drainage that they need. Shingles require much more drainage than the flat roof system. So we don't want this water, because I suspect when we open this up, we are going to find we have some structural damage under there.
if we do find structural damage there, Rich, what's our solution?
Well, depending on the damage, we'll be replacing plywood as needed, re-nailing it, just like we'll be nailing the old plywood, like you see this plywood right here. And we will nail it to code, and if there's any structural deficiencies under there and the trusses, or depending on if it's a simple repair, or in some cases, we've needed to go ahead and get engineering to correct the situation.
I saw you jumping up and down in this area here. What were you looking for?
Well, if you can see, the roof right here is moving significantly under us where this patch is going to be. So that's going to lend us to the fact that there's been some moisture under there, because the rest of the deck doesn't have this situation. But again, we're in this patched area, and exactly what we said. Oh, actually here, right here, come around this side, you can actually see where the water's been trapped in, and this is actually it trying to weep out. You can see the cracks and what they did. So, though it feels like it may have been the right thing to do to seal it, shingles are not meant to be sealed. They cannot be coated. And this is why. It actually hurts the system itself. We started to open it up, and we're starting to see the valley metal. This valley metal, as you can tell, is rusted. So ideally, when we open our roof up, the valley metal will look aged, but this is rusted, and it shouldn't be rusted like this. Whenever we open a roof and we see rust, we know, like right here, moisture's been to it. As you can see, the tin tags that don't get moisture on them, you know, they might show a little touch of surface rust, but they're not fully degraded like this one. I can't even get a piece of it because it's so ripped in half. And that's what we have going on right here, as well as a stapled valley, which is something we don't do. You actually see the roof, that's how old the roof is that it was actually stapled and not nailed with a ring shank. And that's what part of what we were talking about a few minutes ago with the ring shank nails. As you can see, this part of the deck was able to come up, and if you find a nail that's, oh, here's a nail right there, it's not ring shank. See how easy that pulls up? So the other nail has rings on it, and for the most part, once we run into a nail that's been nailed ring shank, they won't come back up. Just like the nails we use for our tin tags are ring shank and not staples. Nobody uses staples anymore, but not everybody will use the ring shank nails because they need to save a couple dollars per box. And here's a couple more that are, they're just so, they've been so wet that they're just falling apart. So this roof has had some problems. Let me grab a roll of nails for you. You can see up close they have the ring shanks on them, and that stops them from sliding right out. They're actually very difficult to pull once they're in. You want to have a gap. You want to have about 1/8 of an inch, about the thickness of a nail between the decking. You get into stuff like this and it's too much. The product isn't designed to support that kind of distance. So there's a couple remedies to this. It can actually be valley metal, but to fix it properly, we're going to be replacing these few sheets of deck and bringing them over. And as we get into the nailing, you'll notice some of these sheets don't have enough nails, right? So these nails, not only are they substandard, so we'll be re-nailing the deck, and we'll be nailing so we have the ability to keep the plywood down. A lot of people, when you talk about windows and stuff, you're worried about air getting into the house, right? So the big thing about a roof, in a roof like this, we actually have our flat roofs engineered, and when we get to putting the roof down, we'll show you the engineering for a roof and why we do it. But roofs are measured in uplift, because actually as the wind goes across it, it's like the top of an airplane, and it actually pulls and sucks the wood off of the roof. So the ring shank nails are the prevention for that, because once one goes, then the air pressure in the house goes up and everything changes. But until that point, we're relying on the structure of the house to be able to fight the uplift. And when we see the engineering, we'll talk about uplift numbers and why they're important. So what we have here is we have a repair of the flat roof. There's a number of things going on at one time. But first off, we're going to talk about the plywood and the way that it was repaired. All right, so plywood has to be able to repair to span at least a couple members. So the reason for that is you can just get in there. See how that, once that one nail goes, everything will go with it. So what we want to do is span more distance with the Ringshank nails and have the strength of not just a foot. This actually looks like it was repaired with roofing nails. And over here, we're going to talk about this because this is, you can see the product was applied directly to the roof. And we were talking about how if you don't use the 30-pound felt, it actually destroys the product and actually you will tear the plywood up and it just sticks to it. So you actually degrade the structure of the roof. When you go to repair it next time, you'll be putting on all new plywood. What we got here is we have a roof leak where it wasn't pouring through. What we had was a very slow leak, so it was kept wet all the time. It was never able to dry because once the water is under the product, it can't dry. So the product, the plywood underneath just starts to fall apart. And obviously if it can't hold itself, the nails won't help it. And right here we have why we have to use Ringshank nails. This roof shouldn't be coming up like this at that kind of distance. Because once a little piece of the roof comes loose, the roof will actually start pulling it and twisting on the roof and it will take more with it. We shouldn't be able to pick that up without one of these shovels.
Replacing some of the decking, we did a deck inspection, we saw a lot of damage, so we had to replace the plywood. Tell them about the plywood that we're replacing it with, Rich.
Alright, so first off, the reason we're replacing right now, if you come over here, even through the plywood, even through all the roofing, you can see where we were getting water through the roof. And though it wasn't quite a structural issue yet, it wasn't too long before it starts getting worse like this over here. And then eventually it'll become what's over here.
Tell us a little bit about what we see over here, Rich. What happened?
What we had is we had this water that was most likely lapping over the edge from an improper seal and coming back to it. That's why it rotted from the edge back in. We're actually going to get some lumber in here and replace these properly. So we come back further. We're going to replace 6 ends. So structurally we're good. Different note here. These are the clips when we talking hurricane mitigation right here. When we're talking clips, that's a clip. A toenail would be one nail or a strap can come up and over. So that's something we look for because that helps with insurance. Now what we're going to do is after that we finish these over here, we're going to put a new plywood deck down. We're going to be using 5/8 plywood. It's a 4-ply plywood. And we're looking for it for its strength in 4 plies as well as the thickness of it. When we walk across the regular deck, we can feel deflection just from our own weight walking across it. The 5/8 won't have that issue. It's much stronger. It can take a shot better if something hit it, but it also gives better strength to the roof as it's a stronger structural material.
Rich, I see a lot of companies might use OSB boards in other part of the country. What's your opinion on that?
Well, the OSB structurally is safe, but the problem is when you have tearing motion, like the wind gives, it's not a viable solution here in Florida.
Yeah, so here in Florida, 5/8 plywood, that's the way to go.
What we have here is we have one of the sheets that was on the flat deck. You can see where the water was coming through. And a lot of times it doesn't show itself because you can see where actually the rafter of the system was still there, so there was nothing collapsing. But obviously it was enough so that it could already rot all the way through, and then it was spreading. So that leak is somewhere in the neighborhood of 14 square feet. Not quite half a sheet of plywood, so it's a pretty substantial leak in the structural damage underneath. Unfortunately, it was just beginning and it wasn't as bad as the plywood, but this is where it starts, and you can see it spreads laterally and it doesn't always go straight down. Some of the differences we're going to talk about here is the product we're using. We've gone ahead and redecked this whole area right here. We're finishing up this corner. And one of the things we want to talk about is the thickness of the plywood. This is a 5/8 inch CDX. It's a 4-ply, it's a strong plywood. You'll notice that over a couple hundred pounds. The deck won't move. If you see a 1/2 inch plywood deck will actually move under our weight. So what we do is anything we pull up and replace, we replace with a stronger deck, we nail it.
Okay, we just finished the redecking for the flat portion of the roof. We're getting ready to lay down the underlayment. Rich is going to explain what we're using.
All right, the first thing we're going to be talking about is we're going to be correcting this roof. If we look at the level on this roof, it's actually a flat roof. What we don't want is we don't want a flat roof. We need to be able to pitch the roof so we have positive drainage on the roof. That way water runs off. So what we're going to start here is with an elasto base. Right here, this is a nailable base. It's a fiberglass mat, modified bitumen. And what this is going to do is this is going to give us our first base, and then we're going to start being able to work on pitching the roof above this.
All right, Rich, go ahead and go over the nailing procedures according to the engineering.
All right, what we're going to do is we have 3 different zones we concern ourselves with. It's just not random nailing. We have engineering for it. And what we're about to do is put the foam, start giving it the cable. But what we have to do is to be able to hold the foam down with the adhesive. So we have certain nailing patterns we have to follow. The corners are nailed considerably more, as you can tell, as opposed to the edge, and then compared to the field. So we have 3 different nail patterns, and what we're going to do is we're going to set epoxies to hold the rest of the roof on over the metal so they grip and they won't come loose in a hurricane. This roof is designed in the corner to have an uplift of a negative 112.5 uplift, so that's pretty high, pretty substantial.
You were explaining earlier on the corners, you have the extra nailing for the directions of the wind speed is taken up both directions.
Right, because a roof can only take a wind from one direction, where the corner takes it from both directions and can peel the roof back much more easily.
Okay, we just finished laying down the Isoboard on the flat portion of the roof, creating the pitch. Rich will explain more about that.
All right, so what we did is, if you look at the level here, you can see we've created a pitch. We used about a 1/4 bubble there. So what the taper edge looks like is each piece starts out thin and gets thicker. And we graduate from 1/2 inch all the way to 2.5 inches. Giving us a positive water flow. And if we look over at the corner here, instead of maintaining a single slope, the roof actually slopes in 2 different directions now. So we maintain from the ground, it doesn't look like anything's happened up here. The thickness of the roof is still the same, even though it gets to 2.5 inches. The benefit of this system is it gives a R6 for every inch. So we're actually picking up insulation value on the roof as well.
So essentially the enclosure below us is going to be much cooler for the homeowner.
Yes, yes, it'll actually, yes. This foam system actually gets your system back to a nice flow so you don't have water being held on the roof.
Okay, Rich, tell us about the drip edge we're going to install.
All right, what we're going to be doing is we're going to put a drip edge on. What this does is it comes, the roof lays over top of it. What it does is the water can come down and it kicks it out. So what water will do is it can come back and it'll wick up. So the drip edge actually holds the water away from the building.
So different people talk about different inches that they use for drip edge. What do we use and why?
Well, we use a 3-inch face. The face is the part you'd see. The top side always matches it, but the face, we like a taller face, get it further away from the roof. And the smaller it is, the more likely it is to get back to your roof. Actually, if we look at the old 1x2 drip edge that was here, you can see what happens when you have a 2x2 drip edge is that the water was able to come and wick back up into it and actually rot the 1x2. And that 1x2 is about to go on, and it goes like this. And the reason for that is just to hold it further away from the fascia.
Typically, what do average roofing companies install as a drip edge?
Most companies like 2x2. It's a little less expensive, but it doesn't perform as well.
And I've even heard some companies say they use a 6-inch drip edge. What would they do that for?
Well, if they're using a 6-inch drip edge, that would be they're either referencing 3x3 before it's bent, or they're trying to get down to cover something. All right, this is an actual 4x5 angle flash. And what this does is it's going to separate this roof from the fascia. So it'll allow the shingles to sit on top of it and the paper to sit underneath of it with the peel stick over it, so it'll keep the water from getting into this roof.
Go ahead and demonstrate what we're using the wood on the drip edge for.
All right, the 1x2 actually, so as the drip edge comes out, this actually holds the drip edge away from whatever's here. So if your roof is up here, which it is, would be, right here, this is just made to keep it away from walls, away from fascia, whatever is below it. Otherwise, it would be back to it, and when the water comes down, it's able to get back in there and behind, and it actually wicks up into it. Yeah. And this stops that from happening. This is a PG 500. This is actually designed to work with the self-adhering roof. It's made by the company for it. It's designed to last substantially longer than any typical roofing cement. What we do is first we're lapping the metal so no water can get in there, and in a few minutes after we finish nailing, we're going to prime it, and then we're going to roof cement over that. So again, it creates another barrier for water.
All right, Rich, what's next?
All right, next step we do is we get the metal ready for the adhesives that go on top of it. We use a asphalt spray primer. It makes it so the products can stick to the metal. We're documenting for two reasons. Of course, we're documenting so if anybody has any questions, you can tell that we're working on the roof that we're working on. So we're documenting the nailing as well as landmarking, so we know that we're on the roof. That way, inspectors have the ability of not seeing every part of the inspection, but we can show that everything was done to code, that there's no question about that.
Exactly what are they looking for?
Well, in this case, they're looking for the nails at 4 inches on center. They're looking at we're primed on this because we're going with a flat roof. And in a minute, we're actually going to put some PG 500 around the whole perimeter, and that's going to cover most of the nails. So we want to get the pictures before we do that step.
Tell us about this step we're taking here.
All right, this here is the modified roof cement, which again, it's a different grade. It's not something you typically find. It's a professional grade. But what it is, it's designed to help the underlayment, the self-sealing. It's going to give another bond so that when it's also bonding to the edge, it's also not going to be able to get fluids under it.
Now, is this necessary to pass inspection?
Depends on where you're at. Not in all places, but we always maintain the highest standard and the highest degree of work level, so we go with Dade County High Velocity Hurricane Zone, which is the highest standard.
Is there a certain way to do this that you want to avoid? Do you not want to bleed in too far?
What happens is if you get too close to the edge when we smush, we're looking for a bleed out, so we just want to start to see it, but we don't want so much where it starts running over the edge.
Rich, what's our next step?
All right, the next thing we're going to do here is we put valley metal down. This goes underneath the first layer. But basically this does, it's metal in the valley, so if anything hits the valley, it supports the roof and doesn't let everything poke through your roof system.
There's a few different ways to secure the valley. This is one of our secret ingredients to keep it clean. So we can't shoot it up. You can see it's rolling over top of it underneath. So typically on a valley, if you stepped on it, it would crinkle inside the valley. With our secret ingredient, it doesn't do that.
6 inches across the top of your valley. About a 1/4 inch off your metal.
Which is the reason why we're doing a half a strip here.
There is a layer on top of this, and we don't want the seams in the same place, so we want them. This will put the seams at 1.5 and 4.5, and beyond that 7.5. And what this does is makes it so the seams are half a roll apart.
All right, Rich, what are we doing with the lead boot?
Okay, what we have here is we have a penetration. This is a vent stack from the plumbing system, and what we do is we put lead boot around it. There are some people, competitors, that will use poly, which is a vinyl, and the problem with it, you're putting a 50-year roof on and you're putting something on there that will last 10 years, sometimes even less.
Wow.
And they'll shrink and crack. And I mean, you can replace them, but the whole point of it is to put a product in that lasts as long as the roof. Bleed out makes it so we know that it's 100% covered underneath.
All right, Rich, what's our next step here?
All right, what we're putting down now is the cap sheet. This is what you're used to seeing. This is a mineral surface granular. It's the same sheet as the bottom, it's just coated differently. And the reason it's coated differently is so it protects itself from the sun. That's what the granules are intended to do on the roof, is protect it from the sun.
And is this the final step in the flat roof?
This is the final step in a flat roof. The reason I cut those, so the roof actually gets, it's hard to tell, but it gets wider as we go up. And we don't want the joints to align. So as we do our horizontal seams on the roof, we want to cover them with PG 500 and again get the bleed out, because then we know that those seams can't leak for us. And we have a watertight roof on this new slope system. There you go. Check it just a little. Right there. Alright, flip it forward. Hold it first, don't let it touch itself. Don't lay your side yet. Back up with it. Pull the tight top. Right at the top, right there. There you go. Alright, you roll it to us. Start nice and gentle. Now flip it up. And step on it. Do you pull the top tight?
Top tight.
just rained a few moments ago. We're back up on the roof. Rich is going to explain what you can see on our new flat roof versus the neighbors.
Right, on this flat roof, we went ahead and put the Isoboard and pitched the roof. You can see that the roof is virtually dry after just a little while after the rain. More importantly, you look over at this roof over here and you see the water sitting on top of it. That's bad for a couple reasons. The water structurally isn't good for the roof because it's holding a lot of weight. They're not really designed to hold. Also, it's not good for product to have water sitting on it. Most roof systems aren't designed to have standing water like a commercial roof would have.